Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and today I want to talk about The Lone Ranger. And these are the Grosset and Dunlap Lone Ranger novels that I've collected over the years. And the cover you see here is the very first Lone Ranger novel written. It says here written by Franz Stryker, but in fact he did not write it. It was actually written by a writer named Gaylord Dubois, who wrote some westerns for comic books, and some western novels in a children's series. This is technically a children's series novel, but it was published by the famous series publisher Pinnacle. Pinnacle Books did 8 or 10 of these novels. So this is the very first one. Gaylord Dubois wrote it. Eventually, in later editions, you can see the embossed cover of the Lone Ranger on the cover there. This is one of the later editions. This one was actually published probably in the 1950s. This is what the actual first cover looked like. And it's signed by the artist, Paul Lone, who did the cover and the end papers that you saw. So this is the first novel. And this will be the second novel. This is called The Lone Ranger and the Mystery Ranch. And he signed it, Paul Lone. Notice the costume is the red costume. This is what the original cover looked like. The end papers are different. You can tell that it's a different it's a different artist. It's a Ray, it looks like Ray Paul did the artwork. And the uniform that he's wearing looks like the TV series. Right, so that's The Lone Ranger and the Mystery Ranch. And I'll show you what the Pinnacle paperback looked like. This is number 2, The Lone Ranger and the Mystery Ranch. Beautiful Western cover. Published by Pinnacle. And these are just publishers. It's very square bound binding. These are hard to find in good condition. Usually they're well read. Westerns are always well read. All right, so that's The Lone Ranger and the Mystery Ranch. This is The Gold Robbery, The Lone Ranger and the Gold Robbery. Franz Stryker wrote it. And this was a library book that was withdrawn. And it looks like, yes, this was the Toronto Public Library, which I likely purchased for something like 50 cents. All right, so that's The Lone Ranger and the Gold Robbery. Not bad for 50 cents. This is The Lone Ranger and the Outlaw Stronghold. Franz Stryker, number 4. End papers are by Paul Lone. And it's a later, you can tell it's a darker beige. It's a different, it's a later printing. And this is a wartime edition of the Mystery Ranch. And you can tell it's a wartime edition because the paper is really cheap. And there's the watercolor. I've never found these wartime editions to ever have a dust jacket. I don't think they were ever published with a dust jacket. I'm not sure though. All right, so that's what the wartime edition looked like. This is The Lone Ranger and Tonto. Franz Stryker wrote it. 1940. So these always came out in multiple editions, number 5 in the series, featuring other books by different writers, other series books. This is The Lone Ranger and the Haunted Gulch. Franz Stryker wrote it. That's Francis Hamilton Stryker. Was a prolific writer, not in terms of the so much as the books, and more for the radio series that he did for WXYZ radio initially from the late 1930s up until the 1950s. And this is number 6. And he wrote an enormous amount of the scripts for the radio series. This is The Lone Ranger Traps the Smugglers. So there you see it. Beautiful square cover. Number 7 in the series. And this is The Lone Ranger Rides Again. This is number 8 in the series. This has a facsimile edition cover. All right. This is The Lone Ranger Rides North. And this one has a story that features the nephew of the Lone Ranger. And Franz Stryker also wrote the Tom Quest series. This, I'm going to show this now. This is one of the rarest Lone Ranger novels that I have. It's The Lone Ranger and the Secret of Thunder Mountain by Franz Stryker. One of the earliest. This is number 14 of the Bantam book series, what they call a Bantam LA. These were sold in cigarette machines. If you can tell, this is the size of a cigarette box. And you'd go to a local bus stop, you put in your dime or your quarter, whatever they were worth, and out would pop up this paperback. So that's how this was purchased. And it's still readable and it's still intact. All right, so that's that one. That's number 14, The Lone Ranger and the Secret of Thunder Mountain, probably one of the rarest of all the Lone Ranger stories. All right, so that's that. And this is The Lone Ranger and the Silver Bullet. Yeah, this is the Ray Paul end papers. You could tell later edition, always with the kind of off beige, I don't know how to describe the color, but off beige, amber or whatever color of this book, published by Grosset and Dunlap. And this is number 10 in the series, The Lone Ranger and the Silver Bullet. The reorder number is the 18th book in the series, which is the last book. There's a total of 18 novels that make up the series. All right, there's that. This is The Lone Ranger on Powderhorn Trail. And this is an early one. I want to show, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, Rene Koolhof. is the artist here. RK. There it is, the signature. RK. Rene Koolhof. All right, so that's that one. That's The Lone Ranger and Powderhorn Trail by Fran Stryker. And this is one of my favorite of all the covers. This is The Lone Ranger in Wild Horse Canyon. Beautiful galloping horses cover. This is number 12 in the series with the faded spine. Just look. Yeah, it's a later edition. You can tell by the hard by the covers. Okay, so that's The Lone Ranger in Wild Horse Canyon. And this is The Lone Ranger west of Maverick Pass. And there's the Paul Lone end papers. The kind of, well, it is a darker beige, almost brown, light brown cover. Lone Ranger. And so this is either a first or close to being the first. You have to go by the covers. Yeah, it's the first, I think, but I am not sure. The reorder number is the west of Maverick Pass. Yeah, it goes up to Wild Horse Canyon. All right, so that's the first, The Lone Ranger west of Maverick Pass. This is The Lone Ranger on Gunsight Mesa, and this features him for the first time in his blue uniform and Tonto with the one feather that Jay Silverheels made famous in the TV series. And this is a later edition. You can tell by the type of cover. All right. Interior artwork. Rene Koolhof did the interior here. Okay, so that's The Lone Ranger on Gunsight Mesa, number 14 in the series. These are hard to find in any condition, actually. And this is The Lone Ranger and the Bitter Spring Feud, number 15 in the series. And that's a nice cover there. It's binding. All right, this is a facsimile cover. This is The Lone Ranger and the Code of the West. I think I got the center right. Code of the West. And it has the Ray Paul. And the interior art is by, can't tell, it's unsigned. He usually puts an RK there. This time he didn't. Can't tell who the artist is. So this is The Lone Ranger and the Code of the West. Copyright is 1954. So this is one of the later novels. Goes up to 18. And this is one of my favorite covers. It's a railroad mystery novel. Railroad Western mystery novel. It's The Lone Ranger, Trouble on the Santa Fe by Fran Stryker. Has a faded spine, faded dust jacket. Number 17 in the series, and one of the rarer ones. And you can tell by the reorder number that this is the first. And this is number 17, I think from the 50s. We'll look inside. Don't know. I don't know who the artist is. Copyright 1955. The Lone Ranger, Trouble on the Santa Fe. It's a railroad mystery western novel. Well written. Number 17. Another one of my favorite covers. And the last in the series is this one. This is The Lone Ranger on Red Butte Trail. So, number 18 in the series. You can tell. And you can see that he has his blue uniform on, and silver is splayed out there, ready to run. So that's that one. And I'll show you some, I think I showed you this. This is the wartime edition. This is the Trouble on the Santa Fe. This is without the dust jacket. Well read. Ray Paul cover, or end papers, with that Lone Rider on the cover. Alright, so that's Lone Ranger. This is looks like to have been a library book, but there's no, it's other than it being well read. And the tape pulls on the spine, there's nothing to indicate what library it came out of. In the interior, nowhere in the interior, other than the fact that it was well read and has tape pulls. But anyway, Trouble on the Santa Fe, likely a library book. I wanted to show the Samson and Lowe editions. That's what they look like. And they also had dust jackets, but the dust jackets didn't match the Grosset and Dunlap editions. Samson and Lowe, and of course the yellow covers. That's what makes them distinct, but everything else in terms of publication is the same. You could tell the order of the books is different. Yeah, Ray Paul. And copyright, this is not correct, 1936, because this is a later edition from the 1950s. But the embossed cover is the same. And these are the, I wanted to show what the originals look like without the dust jacket. This is what they look like without the dust jacket. They had these they were thicker, and they had these kind of, you know what that is, amber orange covers. Interior had these kind of black and white watercolor type paintings. The illustration is by Paul Lone, famous Western artist. All right, so the pages are a lot thicker. This is a first. That's how you can tell. And I'll show you more paperbacks. These are beautiful copies. This is number 4, The Outlaw Stronghold. It says, soon to be an international film spectacular. See when this was published. Like I said, it was in the wake of the Legend of the Lone Ranger Western film that was released back in 1981. This is July 1978. Cover illustration by Bruce Minnie. So Pinnacle Books. And Pinnacle Books were the series publishers. You see there, The Executioner. Let's see what else. And they have Edge. Edge by George G. Gilman. Really, Terry Harknett. And it's one of the most violent Western series ever published. It makes The Man with No Name, Sergio Leone Westerns look like a Boy Scout. Anyway, so that's number 4, Lone Ranger and the Outlaw Stronghold. Nice crisp copy of that. And number 3 in the series, the Gold Robbery, the Lone Ranger and the Gold Robbery. Nice copy of that. And yeah, so according to this, already published. Okay. This was what some of these later books were never published. I don't believe this one was ever published. Powderhorn Trail or Gunsight Mesa was ever published in Pinnacle. So the Lone Ranger and the Gold Robbery. All right. I think I've shown everything of my Lone Ranger collection. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this Lone Ranger book series that I have. These are some of the paperbacks. I can, when I find good crisp copies of the paperbacks, I'll buy them. But so I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, remember to give me that thumbs up. Thanks everyone who's subscribed, and please continue to subscribe if you want to see more content. I have a lot more to show and to talk about in the different comic books and series novels that I have. All right, and again, feel free to comment because it does help the channel. All right, thanks.